Hello, this is Craig with Just Genealogy. Today I want to talk about what I think the skills are that a genealogist has to have in order to get the job done. So, what I've done is I've just created some bare bones slides that I'm just going to talk to so that you have some idea about where I'm coming from and my experience and how I think you need to proceed or how you need to think, how you need to look at things over time in order to improve yourself and become what I consider to be a skilled genealogist. And believe it or not, just not someone just doing genealogy. So let's talk about this in the terms of an introduction for a bit. And basically, as a genealogist, it's my goal to chase my ancestors down. To do that, I have to know what records to use. I have to find them. I have to know about them. I have to go about using them. I have to understand things like what created this record? What record was created before this record? What record was created after this record? Most people just pay attention to the ink on the paper. They don't look through to the life cycle of the record. I always want to know more than what is just on the ink. I want to know what record caused this record to be created, what event caused this record to be created, why would somebody say that when it doesn't make sense? Sometimes I have to get inside their head. Why are they lying? When I know based on other records that they are lying. Or I also want to know, well, now that this record has been created, what other records can I expect to be created? Sometimes you might have to learn a foreign language, or at least pieces of a foreign language, in order to interpret a record properly. Under all circumstances, have to acquire some basic skills that you're going to apply throughout your research. What I want to talk about today are some of the things that will help you and some of the things that will get in the way. I think one of the biggest problems that you will encounter is the assumptions that you have made. Assumptions are by far, in my mind, the biggest and most difficult obstacle in chasing that ancestor. Because you might assume that there's no information in those records that will help you, so you ignore them. You put them off. You don't touch them. Or you allow someone else's assumptions about a record to tell you not to bother to look at a record. This happens many times with archivists where they'll tell you there's no genealogical data in those records. But as a genealogist, I recognize that my definition of genealogy is different than theirs. Mine is person, place, event. It might just be a person. It might just be an event. It may just be a dollar figure with no name associated with it at all because it has an account number. And I don't know at that point who belongs to that account number, but I may have found that account number somewhere else and it's attached to a name. And the person talking to me doesn't realize that I've done my homework. Recognize that many times your assumptions will limit your ability to see your research problem properly. It can also limit your ability to find those records that will lead you to a proper problem resolution. So be very careful of what you're assuming. I try very carefully not to make assumptions. Of course, you're going to, and I do too. But I try to make sure that my assumptions are not what drive my research. What drives my research is what I've learned about my ancestors, what I know about my ancestors, and I'm building on what I know. And sometimes assumptions can get in the way of that. Now, I think one of the best tools that you can have is to be a skeptic. And I've said that before. You may have heard me say that before. I think that taking everything with a grain of salt is absolutely very important. It will help you to recognize some of those erroneous assumptions and even some of your erroneous conclusions. It will enable you to use published resources or information found online with absolute caution. As a publisher, I am a firm believer in that if it is published, it's wrong. And that creates a marvelous opportunity for me to prove that that published work is correct. I don't stick with the published. I use them as finding aids. I'm very skeptical about published works. I'm even more skeptical about indexes. Sometimes you just have to sit down and read those textual records. You have to be a skeptic. Otherwise, your assumptions, remember that assumption, oh, it's got to be right, it's online? I've been accused many times of being an individual who doesn't trust. And that's one accusation that does not bother me one bit, because I do not trust. I verify. It isn't trust but verify. It's I verify and then I know. And verification is not one record. I'm always skeptical of a single record in isolation. I'm very skeptical about having one record that says one thing and then having another record, in fact 5 other records, that say something entirely different. It means that I have to track down those 5 records and see where they actually came from. Where is the original record? Always be skeptical. Records require understanding. If you're just copying the ink on the record, then you're missing a lot. You have to take time to evaluate what you have. The value of a record will be greatly enhanced if you understand why the document was created to begin with. And if you understand what records came before it, and if you understand what records will come after it. You have to understand the process that created the record. Who created the record? Did the person who the record talks about, did they create it? Or did a clerk create it? What was the clerk responding to? What was the individual in the record responding to? Were there other records created by this record? And where are they? Who has them? Can I get them? Now, we have things called data, we have things called information. All I know is that what we have is a jigsaw puzzle. And every single one of these records is a piece in a puzzle. And that it's important for me to know where this record, aka puzzle piece, fits in the final picture. How will it be assembled into a successful proof, a successful conclusion that will make it all come together? You can't just have a set of births, marriages, dates, hatch, match, dispatch. There's so much more to your ancestors' life than their vital records. So you will need to pull together and view collectively what you find. This will identify places where things agree and places where things do not agree. It will also help you to see what puzzle pieces are missing from your puzzle. You want to assemble them as you go along, but you want to fix it in such a way that you can disassemble them also in response to new data. Additional research will always allow you to redefine and refocus what you know. And remember that everything that you do must be based on what you know. Now recognize that certain people, and I'm one of them probably, because I have a reputation for being a military guy, or a Quaker guy, I may focus on certain kinds of records to the exclusion of others because I'm familiar with them, because I'm comfortable with them. But that really doesn't work. When you're reconstructing a family or the life of your ancestor, all records are going to be useful. I have an ancestor who loved to go to estate sales in Davidson County, Tennessee. And for at least 12 to 14 years, I promise you, every single estate sale there was that was within a mile, 2 or 3 of where he lived, he was there. It gave me some insight into him as a person. Remember that knowing why a record was created will lead you to other records. So remember that the information that you need comes from the analysis of a variety of different records, never from a single record. So you want to be sure that you're not excluding records. Always, always, always ask yourself, am I excluding records? Are there additional records that will help me do what I need to do? What kinds of records do I tend to exclude? Well, I tend to exclude records I don't know about, and they're excluded because I don't know about them. So I'm always on a mission to learn about new records. And that's part of what Just Genealogy is about for me, that in response to individuals' questions, I can learn about new records. So I'm constantly wanting to learn about new records so that I don't exclude them from my search. That is also going to require that you think analytically, because remember, when you look at a record, you're trying to determine not only what's on that record, but what records caused it to be created and what records were created by it. So you have to be constantly thinking analytically so that you are not excluding records from your search. You have to recognize that it's possible to take two pieces of information found in different records and combine them together to create some previously unknown fact. If you exclude one of those records, you won't be able to do that. So you need to analyze your own research methods and habits almost constantly. You need to deal from a perspective of continuous improvement. This is why I talk to a lot of people, because they know things I don't know, and I can't stand not to know something. It bothers me when I don't know something. So I'm constantly learning from other people. Sometimes when you're working on a problem, you might get confused and you might lose focus. Sometimes it just helps to get a night's sleep. Sometimes it helps to just get up and walk around. You can't spend 15 hours working on a problem straight and expect to not be confused and expect not to lose focus. I've always believed that the number one tool that a genealogist has is sleep. So if you think you're confused, take a step back. If you think you've lost focus, look at the problem again. Maybe the problem is that isn't what your problem should be. It may be that you have to define your problem so that it is more focused in order to solve your problem and your confusion. Whatever you do, you have to be constantly thinking analytically. And that is a problem for some people because they're hatch, match, and dispatch. They sit in front of their computers all night long just copying things from things and putting them in their family trees. Ancestry, MyHeritage, they're all full of information that they just copied from somewhere else without analysis, without even thinking that that child couldn't possibly be born when her father was 12. Or how is it that I have a 7-year-old who's applying for a pension for the Revolutionary War? Is that possible? The answer is yes. Is he likely to get the pension? No. But you want to look at that pension, that rejected pension, very analytically, and it may be that in fact that 7-year-old gets a pension because when you look at it, you see affidavits from people who say he was 7, he was a drummer, he was there, I was there with him. You get a pension that way. So what skills do you need? You need to be able to assemble data. You need to be able to think analytically. You need to be able to understand your research methodology and your own habits. You need to be able to interact with other people so that they actually want to interact with you. That was my problem in the beginning. People didn't want to interact with me because I was a jerk. But anyway, some people still think I'm a jerk, but I might get over that. So what skills do you need to have? You need, the one skill you have to have is to have a sense of exhilaration when you have found something that was difficult to find. And you also need to constantly focus and refocus as you go through. Now, one of the problems you may encounter over time is that people react to what you've said, and you believe you're right and they believe you're wrong, or more likely, they in fact are wrong, they don't have good source citations, this is what they want to have happen, and you've just ruined it for them by demonstrating that they've been wrong for 30 or 40 years. And can you take the heat? So recognize that as a genealogist, you automatically open yourself up to criticism when you publish your results in an article or a family history. But recognize if you don't publish your results in an article or family history, you're not really a genealogist. You're just somebody doing genealogy. So you have to be aware that research can and probably will be criticized, and sometimes severely. That's why it's always important for you to have peer review of your work. That's why it's always important that you have the appropriate source citations. That's why it's always important that your work can be replicated. So that you want to make sure, for sure, without fail, all your sources are documented thoroughly and carefully, and the text is as error-free as you can possibly make it. And trust me, you can't do that by yourself. So you're going to need help. You're going to need friends. Actually, it's one great big happy family for the most part, and you're welcome to join the family. You want to make sure that you're determined. And by determined, I mean genealogy is not easy all the time. It may take you 20 or 30 years to actually bring everything together in order to determine the answer to your question. It may take 20 or 30 years for you to bring all the data together. I do compilations of data all the time. I have a War of 1812 project that I've been working on for 35 years and talking about ad nauseum for 35 years, and I'm still not done. I'm still working on it, but I'm determined to get it done someday. It's over 1,200 pages right now. 3 volumes of people who died in the war and a little bit after. Trust me, I'm determined. Just as I'm determined to make you a better genealogist, if that's what you want. So what will help make you a better genealogist? It's keeping that positive attitude. Some research problems seem insurmountable, but amazingly, eventually, over time, things get solved. More data becomes available. More records are made available. Things you never heard of all of a sudden come into view. It may require dogged determination. Brick walls do crumble, especially when you realize you probably created the brick wall yourself. Especially when you realize, and what's really embarrassing is when you find that brick wall and it finally crumbles and you figure out that you had the answer to the problem in your unorganized material and that it had been sitting there for 20 years. So keep that positive attitude. Constantly address your material. Make sure that you're aware of what you have. Put it in a way that allows you to have a positive attitude. So this has been Craig, just talking on what skills you need to be a genealogist. I think that the most important skill that you can have is understanding records, why they're created, how they're created, and what purpose they have. And recognize that you need to make sure that you're actually dealing with the original record and not some derivative. As long as you have a positive attitude and you continue to analyze records instead of just writing things into your genealogy software, you will have a lot of fun. So this has been Craig. This has been Just Genealogy, where we are converting people doing genealogy into genealogists day by day. Thank you all so very much. Things are just moving right along, and you will hear from me tomorrow.